Hello everyone. Just wanted to make a video today reviewing the classic 1960s film The Apartment, directed by Billy Wilder. I'm assuming if you're clicking on this video, you've either seen the movie and just want to hear someone talk about it, or you saw it on the AFI Top 100 Movies of All Time list, and you're curious what somebody else thinks about it before jumping in and watching it. I'm just going to go ahead and say right off the bat, this movie is fantastic. Absolutely worth watching. I would say watch it before you listen to anybody else talk about it, because half the joy is discovering the different turns in the plot and the different jokes, the witticisms that kind of come out of nowhere and are unexpected, callbacks to lines that you're not necessarily expecting, but come back in such a beautiful, natural, incorporated way. So I would recommend, if you haven't seen it, don't bother with getting someone else's analysis first. Just go watch it. Because really, I think that's the thing that is most impressive about Billy Wilder as a filmmaker in general, but especially this film, The Apartment, is his screenwriting ability. He's such a fantastic screenwriter. This film is full of absolutely lovable characters, or characters that you love to dislike. Practically every line in the movie is quotable and memorable. Some of the best one-liners in any movie I've ever seen. It's also genuinely emotional and captures a theme that I think is just as relevant today as it was at the time of creating the film. The basic premise is it's about a guy who's working at some kind of insurance company. He is allowing his bosses to use his apartment so that they can have affairs with different people and cheat on their wives. The main character's doing this because he wants a promotion desperately. He feels like he has to be some kind of people pleaser, or constantly bending over and just taking it from his boss in order to rise up in this company. Because deep down he thinks that rising up in the company is what's going to make him happy. But when his boss ends up wanting to use his apartment to hook up with a person that he has fallen in love with, that's when the hilarity ensues, hijinks ensues. It's a really silly plot, but it's never like cartoonish or over-the-top ridiculous. All the comic misunderstandings are very naturally woven into the story, and it's natural enough for you to feel like you're getting a sense of culture in the 1960s without it being like too far-flung or too over-the-top and ridiculous. Jack Lemmon plays the main character, C.C. Baxter. Excellent performance by Jack Lemmon. He balances that vulnerability and that relatability that we're seeking from this main character. He nails those two elements, but he also nails the like foolishness and the pitifulness and the wit and all of the comedic beats perfectly. All the jokes are perfectly timed, perfectly delivered. He throws on these little flares in his performance that just kind of add to the joke. He'll always twist it that tiny bit more just to squeeze an extra bit of comedy out of any funny scenario. It's really just very memorable. And his dynamic in the romance in the story is fantastic as well, and believable. You really believe that he cares for this woman, that he's in love with this woman. You also feel his frustrations and his desperation for something better in his life. He's a character that instantly is relatable to anybody that's ever had to work for a living, I feel like. So he's kind of capturing that everyman archetype, but in a way that still allows him to bring his natural charisma to the table. His romantic co-star Shirley MacLaine, however, I think is absolutely the best performer in the movie. She totally steals the show for me 1000%. Her monologue in the diner where she's in that booth with the boss and they're talking about their relationship and they're talking about how he's been promising to divorce his wife, or he's been dangling that possibility in front of her face for a long time now, and it's starting to become too painful for her, and that she feels like she's trapped in this toxic cycle with this guy because he's aware that she loves him, but is also unwilling to fully love her. At the end of the day, the boss is a manipulator, or he's a taker, as Shirley MacLaine says at some point in the movie. She has this great monologue about how in life there's givers and there's takers, which I don't think is fully true, but the point that she's getting at really does speak to something that we all experience and feel in life, that is just this frustrating dog-eat-dog reality of the world where you feel like you're being called on to, you feel like you have to fight for yourself And it's very easy to justify to yourself being an asshole or being selfish and self-interested. But the movie kind of rejects that premise altogether and supports the idea of, it supports that sort of old-fashioned notion that success isn't really all that important, and that what matters is being with the people that you love, having and fostering true human connections where they really love and care for you, and they're not just using you or manipulating you into some kind of arrangement that's beneficial for them. Sort of the antithesis of the hustle culture, this like look out for yourself, this individualistic mindset that was really prevalent at the time in America. That sort of culture, I feel like, was starting to come in to place, and people were getting existential about that. They were getting anxious at the idea of, is this what my life is? I come in, I'm a worker drone, one amongst a million, and there's no individuality to my identity. I can just be replaced at a moment's notice. So why am I doing this? What's the point of me doing this? Is it because it'll make me happy? It'll make me rich? What does that mean to me if I have to be literally getting fucked by my boss constantly? Or as the movie's metaphor goes, my bosses are fucking in my apartment, and so I have to sleep outside on the bench in order to allow them to do that so that I can rise up in this company and maybe be happy. It's why I love that one shot in the movie that's inspired by that old German filmmaker. I'm forgetting his name now. It's like Ernst, something Ernst, I think, but it's this excellent shot of office space where you've got him framed in the center, and the lines are perfect. It's this gorgeous composition where he just looks like a button in a grid of buttons or something like that. He looks like a piece of a machine, of a really big machine, and you just get this like oppressive, almost claustrophobic feeling with all these other people surrounding him, and this dehumanizing almost effect to it. Because yeah, as great as the performances and the dialogue and the acting and everything is in this movie, the directing is also absolutely fantastic. The black and white cinematography is gorgeous. Some of the close-ups of Shirley MacLaine are some of the most beautiful singles I've ever seen in a movie, where it's just like a shot reverse shot in a dialogue. I'm thinking specifically towards the end where Shirley MacLaine is talking to Baxter's boss. They're in that bar while they're celebrating New Year's, and they're all decorated, and everything around them is sort of, it's like a dream. That's really the only way I can describe it, is it's like a dreamy portrayal of this nostalgia for a time that I never lived in. Absolutely beautiful. The shadows are fantastic. The lighting is great. The compositions are great. The camera movements are great. It's a fairly understated film visually. There's not a lot of bells and whistles when it comes to like eccentric editing choices or strange camera angles or like big zooms and like more expressive and strange or unique visual flares. It's going for that more classic, fundamental based Hollywood style. The editing is fairly invisible. You just don't really notice it because we're flowing so much with the story, really. It's not trying to draw any attention to the editing, it's just using the editing to try to smoothen out the experience as much as possible so that you're not even thinking about it as a film, you're just absorbed in the world of the story. And to that end, the movie is completely successful. On this most recent rewatch, which was like a few days ago, or like a week ago, I was so engrossed in it and so absorbed in it that once the movie was over, I kind of had those like 10 minutes or so where it's like, you're coming back into your body, you know what I mean? But yeah, you know it's a good movie when you feel like you're almost coming down from something by the time it's over. But yeah, overall, it's a movie that's not really driven by its artistic choices in terms of the visual presentation. It's definitely strong in those regards and very classical. It's just, that's not really what distinguishes it and what makes it so exceptional, I think. Well, it's not quite fair to say that. It is exceptionally well done. It's just not the unique flair that makes it appealing after all these years. That really does boil down to the strength of its writing. I could quote off the top of my head like 5 lines from this movie that I will probably never forget my entire life. The line about the mirror being broken, the line about not being able to spell, the line about that's the way it crumbles cookie-wise, and the way that it comes back. So many classic lines that really, it's like the minimum number of words to have the maximum impact for the idea that they're presenting. Not really breaking any news in pointing out that it's like a phenomenal screenplay and that if you're a screenwriter, you should absolutely study the movie, but I just want to echo that sentiment because, yeah, it's fucking fantastically written. One of the things that stands out most about how good the writing is the way that there's these constant callbacks to things that are set up. Everything that happens serves multiple purposes at the same time, and you're not even aware of it at the time that it's happening. It's a great way to create a sense of intimacy between the audience and the characters, I feel like, giving them a history with the character to draw on as the story goes on. There's genuinely too many of them to even try to list right now. Suffice to say that everything that happens in the script is eventually paid off in some way or another, down to like the smallest details. There's not a wasted moment in the entire film. Every single second of it is serving the plot, serving the characters, serving the overall story. There's no fat at all on the entire thing. It's completely trimmed of any unnecessary or excessive detail. And really, I feel like the crowning jewel of the film is this dynamic between Baxter and Shirley MacLaine's character. I feel terrible. I love this character, but I can't remember her name right now. Fran something. It's Fran. But Baxter and Fran, their dynamic with each other is just so subtle and natural and beautiful and believable in this way that almost feels vulnerable for Billy Wilder to be writing about. I'm thinking specifically of the scene where Fran is in Baxter's apartment and she looks at him and she says directly to him, "Why can't I ever fall in love with a nice guy like you?" And I think in some sense, most men can understand that sentiment or can relate to a moment in their life where they felt like that statement was being addressed to them. And it's such an honest thing for Billy to be writing about. And he does it without any judgment to the Fran character because he's very empathetic to her position. In fact, I would argue she's the beating heart of the story. You're never ever meant to think like, oh, what an idiot, Fran. Why don't you just leave this douchebag? Like, he's so dumb. Why are you so stupid for falling for him? It's like, because she's being manipulated. Because she, just like everybody, wants to be loved. And here's this man in this position who makes her feel loved some of the time. Eventually, she does wisen up and end up leaving him, but the film is never judging her for her choice to be with him. In fact, if anything, it's inviting you in to feel what she feels and see things from her perspective just as much as Baxter's. And I think ultimately it's a great love story because both of them have something that they need to learn from each other and that they learn together, actually. They're both givers who never take for themselves, who never stand up for themselves. One of them is being fucked constantly by his boss, and the other is being fucked by his boss. They both need to learn to let go of that, to let go of the idea that giving into this pressure will somehow make them happy, and actually pay attention to what makes them happy beyond what you're told is supposed to make you happy. From Baxter's point of view, I feel like the best way to describe the plot is it's like watching a man try to juggle 3 balls at once while he's getting beaten up by some other person, and he's just trying desperately to keep all the balls in the air until finally he just goes, you know what, fuck it, why am I juggling these goddamn balls? Because that's the other thing, in a great comedy, I feel like it doesn't always have to be this way, especially if it's a dark comedy, but in general, I feel like comedies tend to come together best when there's some sort of reconciled ending or uplifting ending that feels like it ties everything neatly in a bow. For a witty comedy like this, especially one that's fairly emotionally punishing throughout. Like, I was watching it with my friend and he just had this sentiment of like, God, can anything go right for this guy? Can anything go well for this guy? He was dying with how frustrated he was at Baxter's situation and his circumstances, which to me is just a testament to how strong that sense of relatability is for that character and how easy it is for audiences to identify with that protagonist. Again, even after, what has it been now, like 60 years? The film has this grounded, natural feeling that because it's being so true to human nature and how people actually act, it's timeless. it's strange, like a lot of the lingo and a lot of the like particulars of the sense of humor might be somewhat dated, or at least easily identified as being a part of the time period that it is a part of. But it never feels like, oh, well, this won't apply to modern audiences anymore, or this won't be relatable. These emotions don't ring true anymore. That never happens. It definitely has this aged but also timeless sense to it. It's aged, but it's not dated. That's what I would say. Or perhaps you could say that some of the comic aspect of it is dated, in that comedy is a lot about taboos, right? And about fads and trends and sensibilities of the time. And those things do change. So the movie being so much about sexuality in this way, I feel like has lost some of that taboo energy that fuels the comedy. Because nowadays, it's just that sex and sexual topics are far less taboo to talk about in public or to see on a film or something like that. Like back in the day, they used to make songs about sexuality, but you weren't allowed to be as explicit with how you described it, so they would have to come up with these creative innuendos and way of talking about things without actually addressing it too directly. And this film definitely does that, but I actually even feel like that adds to the charm of it. Listening to the way that characters sort of talk around the point actually makes it a more artful way of describing it, because they can't be on the nose. They have no choice. Like, oftentimes writers, especially new writers, will write dialogue that it's just too on the nose, it's too direct to the point, and that makes dialogue sort of flat and boring and uninteresting. But with that kind of limitation on it, where it's just not even possible for you to be completely straightforward, you have to find some creative avenue around the direct thing in order to express yourself. It leads to a lot of very clever, very funny moments. Even by today's standards, I think it's a super funny movie. Is every joke still a 10 out of 10? Probably not. I mean, some of the jokes are funnier than others, but the thing about it is that even when the jokes aren't as funny as the other ones, and some of them are genuinely hysterical, the story is always moving and the plot is always developing and the characters are always developing. So you never feel like that thing that you get in Marvel movies sometimes, where it's like the whole thing comes to a halt so that we can tell some shitty joke that isn't funny and is going to be dated in 2 years. I'm thinking about the what are those? Like that kind of shit. There's nothing like that in this movie. At least nothing that I could identify where it's like, all right, dude, it's not 1960, so none of this shit is funny. No, it is still funny because it's related to things that will always be relatable to some degree. Having a shitty boss, being in love with somebody who's not in love with you, pissing off somebody through a comic misunderstanding of some kind. And honestly, the vintage aspect of the movie is something that I personally find to be an appeal for it. You get these like little glimpses into what casual life was like in 1960. It's actually kind of sobering to see how not all that different things were back then and how close the rhythm of their lives were to ours today. And again, because of the existential nature of the film, it can be somewhat uncomfortable to realize that that reality is still present and was still present at the time, but that's what makes the reconciliation and the liberation at the end of the movie all the more satisfying. That scene where Shirley MacLaine is running through the streets of New York and the music is blasting beautifully and she's got this gorgeous smile on her face. She's such a beautiful woman, by the way, but over and over and over again, this movie was a treat in that way. Bringing things back, finding clever ways to express things that are like so classic and universal, but like done in a fresh way where it's like, I've never seen something done like this. I've never even seen a movie try to imitate or emulate the style of this movie and other Billy Wilder movies, even remotely successfully. The guy had such an individualist style and voice. There's just no way to capture that kind of clarity with expression other than to write your ass off for your entire life and also just have an immense amount of talent. But yeah, if I had to criticize something about the movie, and I really racked my brain hard, I think I could say the one thing that I would want to change about the movie is that I just wish that they showed a kiss between Baxter and Fran in this movie, because we see her kiss the shitty, awful cheater that I fucking can't stand. And I just really, I don't know, I feel like a nice, beautiful, romantic kiss at the very end, just before the end pops up, really would have like all the homies and me would have just, yes, like it would have been that much more satisfying. I mean, it's such a satisfying conclusion that that's really a total nitpick. It's not actually that big of a deal, but there was a small part of me that was just like, why not just show them kiss? But I don't know. I just wanted to see them kiss, okay? I'm not weird. You're weird. Quick fire of a few other things I just want to touch on and mention. I love the way they call him Buddy Boy. Such a fucking perfect passive aggressive roast of him, and demeaning and demasculating and demoralizing, and oh, just chef's kiss. It's the perfect fucking obnoxious thing for them to be saying over and over throughout the movie. I love the Jewish doctor character, his neighbor, who thinks that he's this womanizer. Like, there's all these women constantly coming into his apartment, and the doctor can hear them through the walls fucking, and so he just assumes that Baxter's like just the craziest playboy of all time, and Baxter's just like, oh no, yeah, I'm just the greatest. But then it turns on him. It's a really funny dynamic. That's definitely one of my favorite smaller character dynamics in the story. But yeah, so I've been ranting for like 40 minutes now. This movie's absolutely fantastic. It's immaculately written. It's got fantastic characters. The acting is unbelievably fantastic, legendary, timeless. It's a movie that the more I watch, the more I'm impressed by, and that is, I think, an essential source of inspiration for anybody trying to write comedy, especially. But even just writing a strong screenplay or creating and telling a fascinating story, everyone could learn something from a story like this, and a film like this, a creative vision like this. But yeah, plugging this into my patented 1 out of 10 rating scale that I invented, it's a 10. It's an easy 10. I love this movie. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Definitely an American classic. If you like classic Hollywood, if you like vintage movies, 100% you should watch this movie. It's well worth your time. But anyway, thanks for watching. That's all I got for you. See ya.